Welcome to the Belmont Journal's Thanksgiving Interfaith Special. I'm Mike Crowley, your host. Many Belmont residents have been rattled by increasing news about incidents of hate and intolerance. I know that many folks in the community were disturbed by the attack on the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh. And then only last week, the FBI released hate crime statistics showing that in the past year, hate crime nationwide has increased 17%. This has spurred a great deal of conversations in social media between neighbors, conversations with town leaders about what we should be doing, as well as conversations with religious leaders in the communities. I'm joined today by 4 members of the Belmont Religious Council, each of who are faith leaders or members of their faith communities, to talk about responding to hatred and intolerance, and the unique focus of this year's Interfaith Special. So let me introduce first Janet Sand. You're a member of the Beth El Temple community, and you also had a special idea about how to use this year's interfaith service to respond to some of what's disturbing folks.
I had just come back from Philadelphia, where I was closing up my 100-year-old mother's, who was fine, apartment, and having to get rid of furniture. And I was incredibly pleased that HIAS, what was originally the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society,
Right.
was going to take all of the furniture because there were 21 refugees coming from Ukraine. And the connection with my family's own past, where they helped immigrants, refugees come over, and the orientation of HIAS, they say now, we used to save refugees because they were Jewish. Now we do because we are Jewish.
That's amazing.
Which is amazing. And I had just given this furniture when there was the murders in Pittsburgh and somebody shouting about HIAS, because they're one of the 7 organizations that the government supports in resettling refugees.
Right.
So when I came back, the question was coming into the synagogue, what should people do? People really want to feel like they can participate or do something, and there were 2 things. One was it was a little hard to find a time for a vigil in Belmont. There was one in Arlington, there was one downtown, and the other was that having come through the civil rights movement, the Women's March, I feel like I didn't just want to stand in a vigil.
Right.
Like if I sing "We Shall Overcome" one more time without feeling like it's going to go somewhere. And I thought, but people want to do something. And actually it was on Facebook that a fair number of people posted this saying about, you are not required to complete the task, but neither may you decline to participate. And that's from what's called the Sayings of the Fathers from the Talmud. And I thought, that's the thing, to feel like you can do something. And in my temple, and here, I feel surrounded by people who do great things, who really do fabulous things. And I think, oh, what can I do? And I thought, well, I can do something. Everybody can do something. And to intentionally, so I said, what if we intentionally say to people, everybody who wants to choose to do something, write it down, and when we take a collection, put that in. This is what I did, right?
And this will be the focus. This will be the focus of this year's interfaith service?
Well, this year's interfaith service had already been planned with a focus on a little task, saving the earth. And sometimes I think if we had only one task to choose, I would choose saving the earth, and then we have time to deal with the other stuff. Okay. But so it was added on to something that has been planned and is incredibly important with speakers and things like that. The other piece was that the collection, the financial collection, is going to be taken to give the money to Abbas.
Okay.
Along with, let me mention, there's, the things that get lost. There is also a collection of baby food for the Grow Clinic at Boston Medical Center, which says there are so many things that somebody, but that someone can do something. Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So I'd also like to introduce Reverend Joe Zarro of the Plymouth Congregational Church, also president of the Belmont Religious Council. So Joe, the interfaith service, it's not a new thing.
No.
Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that.
So I started ministry here in Belmont about 5 years ago, and quickly became the vice president of the Religious Council, and then quickly became the president. So this is my 4th year as president, and we've had one at least the past 5 years. I know it's gone a tradition that dates back well before I arrived. In fact, the Religious Council itself was founded in the 50s as a way to foster understanding and build relationships between the different houses of worship in Belmont, and also, as according to their charter, to provide spiritual and moral guidance for the town, which we now see as being a voice for understanding, hope, compassion, and justice. And there are times where we take that moral, as defined very broadly, guidance very seriously. And Thanksgiving service is one of those times in which, as you said, we changed the format last year. It used to be a worship service that incorporated different parts of the different faith traditions that were participating. But we thought last year, with what was going on with refugees and the hate that was being directed towards them, that we wanted to share immigrant stories. And so we had 3 people share immigrant stories. So this year, with the United Nations report on global warming, and we thought this is an important topic to lift up, and we invited 3 people. Peter Fromhoff from Beth El Temple Center, who's also part of the Union of Concerned Scientists and a climate scientist at Harvard. David Webster, who is a congregant at Plymouth Congregational Church and recently retired from the EPA and has been on Belmont Conservation Commission. And then John Coulterman, who is a member of the Unitarian Church, the first church in Belmont. And he's the leader of their green team and is very passionate about the issue. And so we had this planned out when the shooting took place. And we knew that we needed to respond. And Janet had the lovely idea of writing down deeds and bringing the offering. And we also thought that it's really tragic that the reason this man targeted Tree of Life Synagogue was the incredible work they were doing. Right. It wasn't because of it was because of their participation in Abbas and because of resettling refugees. And there were a lot of complex reasons for why he thought there was this sinister plan but we thought we should take the collection for Abbas, and that it really is incredible work and incredible organization, and it's terrible that this is how it's getting its publicity. Right. But we decided that any cash that would be put in the plates, and that we don't actually usually take a cash offering during these, and we decided we would take a monetary offering in addition to the deeds. So that way, if somebody didn't know, they have a good deed they can do right there.
That's really great. So Jen Hoyda, you're the vice president of the Belmont Religious Council. You're also a member of the Baha'i faith community, and I'm guessing that many members of our community may not know much about the Baha'i faith. Maybe you can just talk a little bit about that.
Guessing you're probably right. So, listening to Joe talk just a minute ago about his journey with the Belmont Religious Council, I can just say I can foresee my future, because he came to me this past year and asked me to sit as the vice president, and I'm learning the ropes from him as best I can, for sure. As far as the Baha'i community, so I've actually been a Belmont resident coming up on 12 years. And we do have a small Baha'i community here in the Belmont area. We actually do a lot of things with neighboring communities as well. But the faith itself is actually fairly new, which is why many people probably haven't heard of it. This year we're celebrating the 200th anniversary of the birth of our founder, Baha'u'llah. So 200 years ago, he was born in Persia and founded the Baha'i faith to teach what we call the three onenesses. The oneness of God, that there is one God, one creator. Believe in the oneness of mankind, that all men and women of every nationality, every creed, every walk of life is all equal in the sight of God and have the same soul. And the oneness of religion. So we believe in what's called progressive revelation, where the same God has sent down manifestations at different times during history to bring the same foundational teachings, but to bring maybe new social teachings for that day, such as today we follow Baha'u'llah's teachings that really talk about abolishing prejudice, and that is really what we're talking about today.
So important.
So important.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Farah, Abbas, you are the founder of Belmont Muslim Friends, also the treasurer of the Belmont Religious Council.
3/4 of the board is here. We have a quorum.
So I'm curious your thoughts. Many Americans have misconceptions about the Muslim faith, and maybe you can talk a little bit about your thoughts about that, and perhaps some of your experiences and.
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me here, and really enjoy working with Belmont Religious Council, which is another interesting story of how I got involved. I came to live in Belmont about 20 years ago, and kind of was socializing with just my community for the longest time. And then 9/11 happened. And at that time I was not comfortable, that was just the beginning of trying to do something more than being part of my community. I was trying to learn a little bit more about what's out there. And then the marathon bombing happened. And during that time, I also had young kids, so it wasn't a very concerted effort. But when the marathon bombing happened, that was when I had kids that were a little bit older, and they could understand what was going on, and that really affected me. And the one thing that I started thinking is, do my neighbors know who I am? Do they know have I made my effort to make them understand what Islam is all about? Because right now they're getting a vision or a feel for Islam that's not my Islam. And then I thought, I can't do this by myself. So that's what started me thinking and got me to get whoever lives in Belmont who's a Muslim to come together. And I did a informal tea at my house, invited as many people as I could, and started from there. Now, in terms of personally experiencing it, right after 9/11, coming back into the country, if I'd go visit my friends and family, and where I'm from Pakistan, coming back, the funny thing was, I would never be taken off into a separate line, but my 4-year-old would be on the terrorist list. And so we had to go through extra screening. And we would come back after a 21-hour flight, 2 a.m. in the morning, and we are sitting there at the airport because we're going through this extra screening because my 4-year-old is on the terrorist list.
That has to be so disconcerting.
Very, very. And I think so this was my middle son, my older son was like, but Mom, aren't we American? And that was a very tough question to answer. Yes, honey, we are. So why are we going through this? Because some bad people did some bad stuff. I mean, that's about all I could tell him at that moment. And from then on, there's just been a journey of this. I belong to the Islamic Center of Wayland, got really horrible hate mail about 2 years ago. But the most interesting thing that's coming out of that is we had all the communities around come and support us. And so I want to share that you would think that, oh, just going and saying, supporting people, that's just, I'm not doing much. But that means a lot. Kids were scared to go. Like, I remember there were parents calling me, should we come back to the center? Should we go? And we're like, okay, let's just calm down. We can do this. And I'm with my kids, and I'm thinking, I hope everything's going to be okay. I'm just going to drive in. And there was a line of people outside the center. There was singing going on. There were people from various churches, various synagogues. I remember I have 3 sons in my back of my car, and they were like, whoa, there's a party going on. And here they were like, should we be worried? And from that mode of being worried to suddenly be in the mode of like, so every moment of those, you can reach out, you can get there, you can be there, you can write a letter. There were massive letters that were from wall to wall on it. Makes a lot of difference. Makes a lot of difference, I think. Just recently, I think was it yesterday or 2 days ago, a girl, elementary school girl in Framingham, a Muslim girl, received a note in her locker saying, I will kill you. And before that, she had received a note saying, you are a terrorist. 10-year-old. The thing that really upsets me is the kids. When the kids are doing it to other kids, that's where I feel like, where are we missing? What are we missing? And what can we do to change that before it gets too late, before it comes to the level we're seeing it?
It's so difficult to think about solutions. We as individuals may not be able to solve intolerance and hatred, but I'm curious, Janet. You were talking earlier about this notion that even if we can't solve the problem, we can still do something. You put it in much better words than I can. Can I ask you to explain your thoughts on that a little bit more?
This was a statement from our religious writings that says, you are not required to complete the task, but neither may you desist from it.
So none of us are expected to solve the problem, but we have to do something.
We have to do something. And here's this, I get philosophical. We as human being people have not been on this earth very long. And I think we're not going to be very much on this earth very long. Because I think we're going to probably do ourselves in. But we are not developed very much, and there is a part of us that is primitive, and that says me and them. And that is very hard because we have to make a different we.
We have to sort of rise above these traditional tribalisms that we fall into.
That's sure. Tomorrow, I grew up in a town that was very much like Watertown, actually. A lot of Armenians and Catholics and Greeks and Jews and kind of middle class, working class. In Pennsylvania, when by law we said 10 verses of the Bible and said the Lord's Prayer every day.
In school.
At school, by law.
At a public school.
At a public school.
Yeah.
And there was a we, and it was a white Christian country, and the rest of us were there. I mean, we were tolerated, they didn't throw us out, but it was clear to a lot of people who the we is. So to make a different we is kind of complicated for some people. And in the 2,000-year-old man record of Mel Brooks and Carl Reiner,
Right.
Carl Reiner says to Mel Brooks, who's supposed to be this 2,000-year-old man, when you lived back in the caves, did you have any like songs or anthems? National anthem, he says, yeah. Everybody can go to hell except Cave 242. And we live with that in a very, very painful way. And don't listen and respect each other. And people feel not listened to. You know?
Joe, can I ask you to talk a little bit about your hopes for, you know, how the interfaith service and perhaps even larger than that, the Belmont Religious Council can help heal divisions within the community?
Definitely. So one of the things I was thinking when Janet was talking was about, I saw a great interfaith leader speaking, Ibu Patel, who does a lot of really wonderful things. I can't remember the name of his organization at the moment. But he was talking about how it's not about, you know, Jews versus Christians or Muslims versus, you know, Christians and Jews. It's about pluralists, people who want to coexist and be together, and versus extremists who want their worldview to be dominant and to dominate others. And so part of the we, I feel like, is creating a sense of belonging of we are the people who want to build a cooperative, plural future together. Another thing I was thinking is it's not that being part of the solution isn't a chore. It's not this obligation you have to do. One of the things that I found when I started interfaith ministry was I found a community and a group of friends that were from different walks of life but had that vision. And so it's good to be part of these communities and to do good things. It's not a chore. It enriches your life. And I tell my congregation when I preach, you know, interfaith work is not about becoming less Christian so that we can get along with others. It's about being more Christian. Because in order to really love your neighbors, you have to understand and respect your neighbors as they are, who they are. So this isn't about, you know, playing down our Christianity so that we can get along with others. It's about living and owning our faith in a way that brings us into a plural future, and one in which of compassion and justice. And so I think that when you participate in a religious council, or even when you participate, if you come on Sunday, you'll see this community of people bonded together by really strong things, really strong values and ideals that cut across our faith traditions. And I don't want to say that our differences are meaningless or arbitrary. Like, there's really important differences between each religion. But you'll find a moral core, and when you open yourself to being part of an interfaith community, you can find your tribe in a sense of love and compassion, and that's the force that's going to move us forward. When I wrote my letter about the Tree of Life shooting, I had mentioned that, you know, one of the sad realities about this world is that someone can destroy much faster than we can all create. But there's so many more people who want to create. And I think the Religious Council is one of those places that we can create and heal.
That's great. Farah, can I ask you, people have so many misconceptions about the Muslim faith. Can I ask you to talk a little bit about the role of tolerance in the Muslim community? I think there is a long history of tolerance in the Muslim community, and how that might help you as you try to participate in the larger community in reducing intolerance.
Right. So, Islam is often viewed as a religion that all cultures look at as like a monolithic community. Muslims are a monolithic community. But we are within ourselves also very diverse and have different values. But the one thing that I think we unanimously agree on is violence is not part of our religion, and terrorism is certainly not part of our religion, and that hurting a Muslim life, in the Quran it says that if you hurt one Muslim, it's like you have killed the entire humanity. So with those values, it's very hard for any of us to see these crimes and to not voice, that these are definitely not part of our faith. And unfortunately, the sad part is I think there's a lot of us voicing it, but it's not getting picked up by the media. I think the media is picking up all the other voices, but not these voices. So I actually want to commend that Belmont Media is actually doing this interview and trying to bring this out, because so often this gets missed. And even just in the shooting of the Tree of Life, when the whole marathon bombing happened, the terrorism was everywhere, all over the media. And when this happened, I really struggled to find that word.
Oh, yes.
And so, I just wanted to add to the fact that I think there is a role that I don't know how we do it, but we need to step up and figure out how we get the media to show a more balanced view and the reality on the ground than maybe the 1 or the 2% that are hijacking the religion and giving this wrong impression about the faith that quite a big percentage of the community in the U.S. believe in.
I think if you look at many religions, you often find small minorities that are hijacking them or attempting to, and I think you find that even within Christianity.
However, if a white Christian man shoots people, we say he is crazy. If a non-white shoots people, we say he's a terrorist.
That's an unfortunate distinction.
Mm-hmm. But that's the media that you're speaking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
The idea that a religion exists outside of interpretation it's kind of like the Constitution, like that there's some like you have to interpret a document, you have to interpret a sacred scripture, and people who have hatred in their hearts or want to justify dominance or persecution are going to look and try to find and interpret the religion in a way to persecute and hurt others. And we see that across. And then those who want to work on compassion and love and unity find this very thing tenfold in their sacred scriptures. And so a lot of it is about how people, everybody uses their faith. Everybody looks at their scriptures and decides, none of us have met, even, very few, nobody's alive who knew Baha'u'llah when he was alive. We all have our stories and our traditions that have been handed down, and it's up to us to use those for good and to use those as vehicles to enrich our own spiritual lives and to do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with God, to borrow a phrase from the prophets, the prophet Micah.
Yeah, I agree.
Jen, can I ask you, so when you were talking about the Baha'i faith, I was deeply impressed by this concept of sort of viewing all religions as part of one, and that must meld well with a view of tolerance.
Absolutely.
And in effect, how you see your work on the Religious Council, how you see your work in the community. Can I ask you to talk a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. So I know we're talking a lot about intolerance, and then, you know, the opposite of that word is tolerance, but I actually like to think of the opposite of intolerance as love.
Yes.
Okay.
Right? So really, we're talking about love. We're loving each other deeply. And when you ask me about my community, you know, Farah was talking earlier about having been in Belmont for some time and then coming to this bit of a realization that, oh my goodness, my neighbors might not know me. Mm-hmm. So I had almost a little bit of an opposite situation myself. I had never lived in a community where I looked like everyone else. I grew up actually in Asia. So most of my childhood was in Seoul, South Korea. And then when I moved to Boston to go to college, I settled in Chelsea, which is predominantly Hispanic. Mm-hmm. And so moving to Belmont, I had a 1-year-old baby and I was pregnant with my second. We said, well, where's the best community for a young family? And we chose Belmont. And I was in culture shock because I looked like everyone else. And they made assumptions about me that weren't necessarily true. So after a little while, after a few months of like, what do I do about this? And how do I grow a community? How do I help build a community that I want my children to grow up in? And not having a lot of Baha'is around to, you know, kind of go into a congregation or have sort of a religious community to fit into very quickly, I decided to go to my neighbors. And I started by knocking on doors and inviting people over and baking them something and getting to know them. And I kind of gave myself a little slap on the wrist because I came into this community thinking, oh my gosh, everybody here is so, you know, bland and I look like everyone, and shame on me. Absolutely not. As soon as you meet somebody and get to know them, even for 5 minutes, even for 10 minutes, they're a person, a whole person, right? And so you can find things to love about them immediately. So I think when we are talking about religious intolerance or, you know, or so many of the things that are falling apart that the media chooses to focus on in this world, I think really what we can combat that with is love and understanding. Mm-hmm. So the minute you decide to take that step and get to know someone just for 5 minutes or for a lifetime, you will find a way to love them very quickly. That's the world I want my kids to live in. That's the community that I want to build here. And I love that I get to build that with these awesome people.
That's great. Jana, I wanted to ask you, I have friends that are members of the Beth El Temple and community, and so you know, I hear a little bit about what people are talking about. From your experience, do you feel that that your congregation feels support and welcomed within Belmont?
Absolutely. There were, on a Friday night service after this, on the non-vigil week, 300 people just from the community showed up for that service.
That's actually, can we talk a little bit about
Yes.
that? I meant to ask about that. I wasn't able to attend, although I wanted to. This was something that took place at synagogues across the country, and also at the Beth El Temple.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I think that somebody from the larger Jewish community, one of the kind of nonprofit central organizations, suggested this thing. I think it was called what?
Show up for Shabbat.
For Shabbat. That weekend after the shooting, just to come to a synagogue. And people do want to show support in all those ways, and just came to the service. So it was quite something. And people feel grateful if you say to them, here's something you can do, or we would like to we would like to see you. Are you now Belmont? Compared to these faiths, we got a lot of Jews in Belmont, but in fact, it's a less Jewish town than many of our surrounding towns. But I think it's not, and so over time, which has also led the way to something that the school district is doing, how to deal with religious holidays. You know, which used to be, what do you do on Jewish holidays? But now it's to have figure out an all holiday calendar.
Yep, and they have done a really good job of asking and polling people. In fact, in Chandri School, my son's 8th grade trip was scheduled in Ramadan Eid day, and they give us these dates 2 years in advance, which is so great because I could negotiate with them and say, could we move this a little bit? So now they are doing it such that they leave on the evening of the Eid day.
Wow.
So, I mean, that's a huge leap.
That's
huge
amazing.
Leap.
So you've found that the school system has been willing to make some adjustments or
Absolutely.
accommodations
I
around
would
faith.
say Mr. McAllister of the Chandri School has been super supportive. In fact, my kid is managed to get some other kids together, and they're doing Friday prayers in the school. They found a room, and one of their principals helped them get a space, and they talked with him, and very, very supportive. On the other hand, this is my youngest son, so I had 2 other boys go through the school system. Part of it was me not well informed to make the ask, but also I felt like in the high school there was still a lot of work that needs to be done. And I think they're starting to do that. I see the Diversity Week, we did that last year. We went in as a panel and talked about the different faiths. So I think the work is starting, but there's a lot out there. I think Belmont as a community is changing. I mean, I know you say that they all look like me, but I feel like
In my neighborhood.
I do feel like Belmont as a community is changing, but the administration or the school or the towns, those faces need to present the community a little bit more fully. And how do we go about doing that? I have no idea. But
Somebody asked me about Belmont. First they asked about how many Jews in Belmont? And I said, I think there's one on every block. And they said, what's the town like? And I said, Belmont is a white Christian town. In many ways, and in its values. It's not overly competitive, it's not overly pushy. It believes in fairness and those good white Protestant virtues, but it's, how it's going to become a real town with different people. I mean, it is.
I think that's a conversation that needs to be had. Like, how do we get it there? And I think there's lots of good work happening, but there is space for more, definitely.
I think the thing that makes something change is when somebody you care about is hurt.
Right.
So that in the middle school, if somebody says, here's a child in my care that is hurt by something, we're much more likely to actually do something than kind of from lofty philosophical reasons. Just that feeling when you realize that little girl, that somebody that you care about or know was hurt, and then you make a movement.
Yeah. But why do we have to start from there?
I know, why do we have to wait for that? I don't feel like Belmont is waiting for that, actually.
Yeah.
And I have to commend the Belmont Religious Council, even before I was vice president, for really pushing, some of those relationships within the community, and very much so with the school, with the school community. We talk about the holidays that are now printed on the back of, of the school calendar, and this is the first year that they included the Baha'i holidays as well. And so, for the handful of students that are part of the Baha'i community, it means a lot.
Yes,
it really means a lot, and it also helps them, identify personally, outwardly within their groups. So it's wonderful to hear that at Chenery, your son has found a group that's willing to pray with him. My daughter also at Chenery has found Interfaith group that now comes to our home every week. They're called the Junior Youth Spiritual Empowerment Program, and it's legit. You can Google it. But yeah, so they get together and they talk about their spiritual superpowers, and they figure out what the community needs, and they decide for themselves how they want to serve the community with the capacities that they have within themselves. And at this time in their life, being before high school, it's such a precious, beautiful time. And it's also kind of weird, right? And kind of messy. And I actually think about humanity in that sense right now. You're talking about, we've been here for not that long.
Not that long. Right.
But I see us right now as this adolescent phase, spiritually. And that what we're doing right now, that little bit that we do, each person individually, collectively, we're going to become these incredible adult, world that's just going to, actually bring peace on earth. And that sounds corny, but I believe
it's
it.
corny, but it's important. It's so important.
I mean, one of the members of Belmont Religious Council also had a family, was able to negotiate having an immigrant, a refugee family, actually have a space in Belmont to stay and to become part of the community, which I think is amazing. I mean, that's if we could do more of that, wouldn't that be amazing? Mm-hmm. So it's certainly, steps, as I said, small steps, but they're making Belmont more diverse, and they're certainly adding new flavors to the Belmont community. Yes. And if you could do more of that, I mean, the way that was made possible was somebody decided that they didn't have to they're willing to subsidize the rent to allow this family to stay. Again, it's a very isolating, I mean, as an immigrant, I can speak right from experience to come from a completely different country and to make your home in a new country. So when we do, provide that opportunity for somebody to be in Belmont, we as a community needs to coalesce and help them, be part of the community, not feel isolated in the community. So there's still work to be done in that area.
So one of the things I wanted to ask was, is the interfaith service an opportunity to increase our familiarity with each other's faiths? In the sense that we had show up for Shabbat, an opportunity for those who are non-Jewish to become more familiar with their Jewish neighbors.
There's no substitute for visiting different religious centers on their own terms. I have been a guest at the Islamic Center of Boston and Wayland, and they are wonderful at hosting. We brought our confirmation youth class, so they're 8th and 9th graders, and excellent hosts. And there's nothing like being at an Islamic Center to see both what's different about it, but also I love seeing they had the Sunday school coloring different scenes from Islamic history, and you're like, oh, we have the same Sunday school kind of style and coloring that we post on bulletin boards. The common humanity, and likewise going to the Temple Center. I can't think of any faith that doesn't welcome you to come, especially if you make arrangements. In a time of, you might not want to burst into the room suddenly, but if you call ahead, we're all happy to share our faith, and that's the best way to learn. Now, the great thing about the Interfaith Thanksgiving service is that we're all working together. We've planned something together, and you have representatives from a really wide array in Belmont, from Catholic and Mormon to Muslim and Baha'i and whatever denomination of Protestantism you want to find, we're there. And there's no substitute for visiting. But it's a good place to start, and it's a good place to there's going to be great music, there's going to be great messages about the earth, and so...
And fundraising?
And fundraising, yes, yeah.
And cookies, I hear.
Yeah, there will be cookies and
Cookies.
ciders.
And deeds?
Indeed.
And you'll be writing deeds down.
And baby
priestly
food.
benediction.
Yeah. Oh, this is very fun. So,
Oh, yeah.
number 6, verses 24 through 26 is a very famous benediction, often called the priestly benediction. May the Lord bless you and keep you. And we'll be doing that in about 12 different languages. So the rabbi who is in San Diego right now, but he will be coming back this weekend and be attending the service, will lead us in Hebrew and English, and then different people will be sharing their gifts of language and reading those 2 verses in everything from Urdu to Italian.
That is wonderful. So I wish you so much success with the Interfaith service.
Thank you.
And when this program airs, I think we'll also have some video from that service. So I want to thank each of you.
Thank you.
Janet Sand, Joe Zarro, Jen Hoyda, and Farah Abbas for participating in this so important discussion. And I hope we're able to do it again soon.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.